Good afternoon. This is Mindy Bonselmeyer.
You didn't just hang up on her, did you?
I don't think so.
Hello?
Yes, is this Kevin Price, Sharon Knorr, or Stephanie Zimmer?
This is Rick Pettit here.
Hey, Mr. Pettit, how you doing?
Good. I'm trying to figure out how to turn my damn phone up, though, but other than that, I'm fine.
Okay. So I see we have some presenters that are online, and we have, or some participants that are online, and we have some participants that are on the phone. For those that are online, can you hear me?
Trying to get online. Click on that link. Close the door.
Okay, we do have others that are joining the meeting, which is great. Just want to make sure those that are online can hear. So let me do a little
Kevin Price.
Hi, Kevin. Great. Glad you can hear. This is Mindy Bonselmeyer.
Okay.
Hi, Killer.
Hey, Pettit, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good. Yourself?
Oh, just pretty good. That's about all I can say.
Yes, you're not talking to me individually, so you better watch your mouth.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. We're going to get right to it. Two ways you can ask questions. Obviously, you can keep your phone on mute, and then you can unmute yourself and ask a question. Or if you have questions, you can also type in. There's this little bubble up here. When you click on the bubble, you can type in a question and hit enter, and it'll send it to me, and I'm happy to answer your questions that way, and I will try to monitor that to make sure that we get all of your calls answered. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I just want to dig right into the state degree application. The state degree application, like last year, is in AET. So you will log into theaet.com. You'll log into your chapter, and your student will log into their account, and they will go to reports. When they click on reports, then they will click on FFA Awards Degree Application Manager. And they'll click on that, and I am in my sample state degree manager. I have two samples that I created last year, and I will open one of those up, and then we'll go step by step through the application. If anybody has any questions at any time, like I said, don't hesitate to either ask me via the phone or click on the little conversation bubble and then type any questions that you have. And then I'm happy to answer your questions. And hopefully you may have specific questions that are to your student. If you want to hold on until the end, we can ask those. And for those that want to leave the call or the webinar, they can. For those that want to stay, they may as well. The very first page that I'm on that you should be seeing on your screen is the instructions page. If you're familiar with AET, you know if you click on the circle with the triangle, it will give you a video and it'll tell you all about the application. Those are scattered throughout the application and are very helpful when you're trying to complete the application if you have questions about the application itself. This application will save automatically as you go from one page to the next. You'll see the little old floppy disk, the small floppy disk, not the old floppy disk. And it'll show you that your information has saved. Your JavaScript is enabled. Be sure you have that. It says read the entire page of instructions, which is very good. You can use the tab key. The best thing to do is to use the tab key when going from one cell to the next, then you know it accepts your information. You do have to enter on the cover page your beginning dates and your ending dates. Actually, that's on your basic setup page.
John Cabot, go ahead.
Hey, John Cabot, how are you?
All right, how are you?
Good. We're just going through the instruction page. If you're looking online, you should be able to see that what I have pulled up is the instruction page, and we're just kind of going step by step.
I'll just watch it here, and I got a student that's going to watch it too, okay?
Fantastic. That's great.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Vinny.
You bet. So we do go through it. It just, as the pages are listed off to the left, we'll just go in order in completing those. So you do want to start with your cover page. Information from the cover page will then populate other pages. Same way with basic setup. So if you go in order, it will populate your following pages, and your information should be accurate. Would you not use decimals in the application? The little green question mark it's called a sample. It's basically your question mark. It gives you helpful tips, or it explains what they're looking for in that. So that is also a very helpful tool within the state degree application. There is a checklist that we'll be able to look at, and the checklist, you want them to say met or yes to qualify for your state degree. And then if your students have records that are in paper book or easy records, and you need to type information directly into this application, you would click, this would say unlock, but I already have to type in information because I'm going to show you as a sample, so mine says lock. If you wanted to read directly from AET books, you wanted to click here to lock it into AET. You'll lock it into AET first, get the information generated, and then you would unlock to add in your additional information. Or if you're adding in information completely, like from easy records or from paper books, you're going to click here to unlock the application so that you can type in it. It'll say one of two things there, unlock or lock. If you leave it locked, it'll pull all records from AET. If you hit unlock, then you have to type in all of your information. It's important. Does it have to be locked if they have both easy records and AET? So that was a good question, Stephanie. Thank you for asking me that question. When you're completing it, you are going to you're going to leave it locked and put the AET information will generate there, and then you'll hit unlock to type in your additional information. After you've clicked unlock, you have to leave it unlocked, and all that AET stuff is still there, because if you go back to locking it, it will drop out the information that you enter. So the key to that is do lock first, your AET stuff's in there, and then you click unlock, and then it will allow you to type in your additional information. Did that answer your question, Stephanie? Okay, so now we're moving on to the cover page. The cover page is all of your basic information. Now, in your students, because you have been entered, AET is married with the National FFA roster, your chapter ID and the student's member ID should automatically populate right there. Mine does not, because as I said, I'm using it so that I can type in information for you. But you can see on the cover page, and as soon as I click that, you saw the little disc come up. That's saving my information. So basically all the information on the front of the cover, I don't really think there's anything to highlight here other than to make sure you do have it all filled out. Some of this will pre-populate. Like I said, your chapter ID number and your member ID number should pre-populate. All the rest of the information you will need to type in there. And that is, and you do want to have your GPA. All of this information will be used, class rank, class size. All of that information will be used to validate for the state FFA degree. Basic setup page. This is where those beginning and ending dates we talked about from the instructions will be entered. So your student puts their very beginning date that they were eligible for, that they started an ag class, they could put that, and then so this year's ending date would be 12/31/2017. And then after you've put your beginning and ending dates, you select what type of books the student had. And so if they were research, meaning agri-science, or if they were placement, or if they're entrepreneur. And they could be all of those, or they could be just one of those or two of those. So that is where they would input that information. And then on the beginning page 2, on this basic setup page, we have a question. Let me see what the question is. Will we be able to access later? Mine has no sound. So if you don't have sound, it may be best for you to call in as well. I'm not sure why you aren't getting sound. I don't know if it's on your end or my end, Michelle. Well, I'm speaking and you're not hearing. That's just how smart I am. Let me type an answer here. Okay, so back to this basic setup page, the information from the record book. If you have, again, if their books are in AET, this information will pre-populate and drop into here. If you are in a record book, in an easy record book, whether it be easy or paper copy, this is coming from your white pages. You're going to put the very beginning value date, the day they started their books, and what you have at the ending date in their record book as of December 31st. So you'll put the value of all of these on this very first page. If you have a question as to what something is, just hover over that green question mark and it will answer it in a greater description. It will also give you examples, a very helpful tool in this application. Something that's important Thank you. That was very helpful. I appreciate you muting yourself. That was very helpful. So what I was pointing out is on Section 5 of the Personal Cash and Income and Expenses, the sources of cash gifts. You can read over that what those examples are. That is a gift from a grandparent as a cash gift to start their SAE program. It is cash gifts provided by others, and it's used in the SAE. It's not to support educational expenses. Educational expenses is later down here. You can take your educational expenses out. They can put the expenses they have for that, and that goes in this box right here. Total personal draw, that is where placement students and anybody who's paying taxes will put their federal income tax, their payroll tax, and any meals, entertainment, personal expenses that they have. Those personal expenses go on this line. Sources of cash, as I hover over the green question mark, sources of cash that the student gets that are ag-related, that are not part of their SAE, or other non-ag work could go here as well. It could be winning some award, selling a personal asset, anything that's any other cash coming into them. So this is money that they would put in there, again, from the white pages and what we call our old easy record and paper books. That's where this information goes on the basic setup page. Any questions, either over the phone or through the question mark bubble for this basic setup page? Again, it drops and pre-populates information into later pages. Okay, so this is our state degree page. That we do ask that a student has performed 10 procedures of parliamentary law. The student would check yes or no there. And again, that is a state degree requirement, so they're going to want to check yes. A 6-minute speech. Has participated in planning and completion of the chapter's program of activities. Has been either a chapter officer, committee chairperson, or participated as a member of a chapter. Those are all checkmark yes. Then you're going to pick the area in which they are placement, or that they are participating. Are they a star in farmer, placement, agribusiness, or research? So because I am an entrepreneur in a placement book, I'm going to pick placement. And then I am an entrepreneur, so I'm going to put in my hours that I've totaled up that are my SAE hours. And I'm going to type in 768 hours there. And then the last box on this additional requirements page, it says, did you pay or file a tax return? If yes, please enter the years filed. If no, please explain why. And so this is where I put, no, my parents paid my taxes in the amount of $100, recorded as a gift on the basic setup page. So you just basically have to say yes or no, and if you say yes, years that you filed. If you say no, you got to tell us why. So then here is, and you can see I already have some information put in here, but I will type in some new information for 2017. And I'm going to, so then once you pull down your year, so I put in 2017, and then I'm going to type in something in plant systems, and my employer is Bunselmeyer Farm. And I'm going to say my job description again was crop scouting. And my unpaid hours were 0. My paid hours were 63, and my gross earnings were $630. And my expenses were 0. And if I click on add, that will add that to there. And then you can see below how much money I made or how much money I had in expenses with my, and these are placement pages. You can see placement and exploratory pages. This is how a student would enter that. So your student picks the year, they pick the pathway, they put in who their employer is, they give a quick description of that. Now that quick description, what I advise people to do is the more information you put there, the greater detail your application has. The greater detail your application has, the more likely you would be selected as a STAR candidate. So I tell people if you're serious about this and you want to be considered for STAR, you need to put a lot of information there. I crop scout and I am looking for these weeds, and I am looking for it at this time of year. Give as much detail as you can, and then I think that really helps your students have the upper edge or be on the cutting edge. Then again, they put unpaid hours, paid hours, gross earnings, expenses, and then you click on add, and that adds that. Any questions on this placement page? Okay, so now we're going to entrepreneurship pages. This, again, as you can see, that what I have in here from the last couple years are what I have done in previous webinars. So I'm going to add to the 2017 year, just like I did in the placement book. I'm going to say plant systems. I'm going to say Bunselmeyer Farm. And I have 5 acres of horseradish this year. And in my description, again, as much detail as a student would like to put. I'm just having a little fun now. And then I'm going to click on add, and I'm going to say that I have 5 acres of horseradish, and I'm raising 5 acres of the hot stuff. This is where a student would then put in the scope and size and then the description of what it is. And you can see in the previous years, I've put animals in there. I have put corn. I put my Pioneer number and what it yielded. Again, as much information as the students can put in there, the better off they will be. And the more the committee can read about that student and the likelihood of picking that student for STAR potential. Okay, so then on my income and expenses page. This page, of course, is for entrepreneurship students who are putting in their the sales that they've made or money that they've made coming in or the expenses they have. So if I had cash sales from the 25 acres or my horseradish, let's say I made $10,000 from my horseradish, that would be my horseradish expense, or that would be my horseradish income. And then let's say that I have expenses for my horseradish. Maybe I'm buying my seed stock, or I am paying for labor, then I'm going to have my expenses here. And my cash expenses are $3,200. And I'm going to put that information in here. And do I have any inventory that I'm going to hold over? That is where a student would put in your closing or your beginning inventory numbers. This is where all of these numbers would go. One of the things I would like to make sure that we point out to people is when, and this comes more in the students who have livestock, when students have livestock and they increase in value or they trade labor for working on the farm for their feed expenses, they put in that the heifer increased by $1,000. Okay, if they traded labor for that, then down here where it says non-cash expenses transferred, bartered, exchanged for labor, that could be where this $1,000 would go. So let's say the student worked and they bought them and they paid for the feed or they paid for something, whatever that amount was, it has to be shown here on 1F and then has to be shown again in 2D. Now, if the animal increases in value, it's not a trade labor, but it's a transfer of value, then the transfer has to take place down here, and we increase it right there. And that is important that we do that because we have to, because students will say, well, now that she's gone from a heifer to a cow, she's worth more. I don't question you that she's worth more, but you have to transfer that value somewhere within the book, and that is how it's done. It's done in lines 1F and 2B for the transfer. If it's labor that's exchanged, again, it's done in 1F and then 2D. Are there any questions with that? That is the income and expenses page. Inventory, this is where I would put any animals that I owned, so or any crop that I would have left over. So let's say that I held on to some horseradish sets. And I'm going to have to do it, I'll have to do it in 100 pounds. And the ending value I'm going to say is worth $5,000. I will add that to there. You can see where it's at, and then back on income and expenses, it shows my closing inventory, and it shows that value that I have. So this is where students would put any remaining crops that they have still in their inventory. This is where they would have any seed, fertilizer, chemicals, supplies that they have still in their inventory. This would be where they would put animals purchased for resale. This is where they would put merchandise or crops. And then animals, their market animals, would also be put in line D. These are current inventory items that the student would have in hand. They place all of these here, and they all populate onto the income and expense statement. And then when we get into non-current inventory, these are this is land. These are buildings and improvements. These are items of greater magnitude and size that depreciate. So you do have non-depreciable draft, pleasure, or breeding animals. You have depreciable draft, pleasure, or breeding animals. You have your machinery and equipment. You have land improvements and buildings, and then you actually have land. This is where those would come from their record books. Again, if you're AET books, they pre-populate into here. If you're transferring the information in, you have to give us a description, the amount, and then the ending value, and click on Add, just like we did with our horseradish set. What questions are there about the ending current inventory, the ending non-current inventory, or the income and expenses pages? These are pages where people will have a lot of questions, and it's a case-by-case basis, a lot of times answering questions for different students. But if you have any general questions about that, I'm happy to answer those questions. All of this information is in your books. It's just a matter of finding it. Some of them are not all termed the same way, but I think I pointed out the important pieces of transferring either labor and exchange or transferring the value of an animal as it increases. Those pieces we put in there.
Hey, Mindy, this is Kevin Price. Just a quick question. Our students have not received their fair entry premiums, so how do you handle that on the record books?
That's an excellent question. I've answered it a couple ways, Kevin. They can project what they think they'll make in that, and the FFA chapter could pay them for that, and then when the money comes in, the money could stay in the FFA chapter's account so that the student does show that they got paid. That's really the only way to do it. I don't know how to, place expected income any way other than that, like I said, the chapter paid them and they got the money in and the money would stay at the chapter level.
Okay. Well, our FFA Affairs Secretary, she's got the projected amount that they should receive, so we've got a pretty good idea.
I think if you put projected amounts in there, that would be fine.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions on that? Then we get to the assets page. So one thing I want to point out, this is a page where you don't type anything in. It all comes from previous pages. So just to show you the difference, I'll go back to the income and expense statement. Any yellow box, you can type anything you want in those boxes. But when you go to the assets page, none of those are yellow boxes. This is just a page that shows you where you're at with all of your assets. Same way with the liabilities page. It pulls all the information from these income and expense statement pages. So it is pulling from there, and if there was a yellow box, you can type. If it's not a yellow box, you can't type. This shows you your net worth, and it shows me that I'm not balanced. And that makes sense because I claimed an inventory of $5,000, but I haven't shown that I have that in my account. So when I hover over the question mark, it says a comparison of the ending values, the total assets. The values on the assets page is equal to total liabilities page. That means they have to equal dollar for dollar, and so it's not equal. So when there's a difference, it'll tell you if the difference is positive, you have either overestimated your asset values and not reported a liability, or understated the net income of your SAEs, and it tells you to review your entries. If it's a negative value, being there in parentheses, it means I have underestimated or understated my asset values, or I have overstated a liability and overstated my net income from my SAEs, and it tells me to review my entries. So you can see that I'm off by $7,230, and when we go back and look at my entries that I have, we have to find where that $7,230. So if I go back to my basic setup page and I show that I have this ending value, that I do have that money in hand, or that I haven't lost that money, then it shows that it's balanced. So if I'm saying that I made this money, and it says met now, if you can see that, if I'm saying that I made this money, I have to show where it's either been spent or where I still have it. And again, when I clicked on that, it has to match dollar for dollar. For those of you, this is the first time doing the state degree application. If you did it a couple years ago, this was a new piece added last year. This matches up exactly the way the American degree application is, and that's something I always want to reiterate to everyone, is that these dollars do have to match dollar for dollar. Again, this is not a page you can type anything in, but it is a page that gives you the summary, and it gives you a chance to go back and check this information within your application. And then it tells you if you met the qualifications for the state FFA degree. It tells you either you earn the state degree by productively and investing at least $1,000 and have a total SAE earnings of more than $1,500. That's one way to earn the state degree. The other way to earn the state degree is to productively invest at least $1,000 and have your unpaid hours. And if you remember correctly, back on this additional requirements page, this is where it takes my hours, my 678. If I took that back down to 0, it would show that I'm not met on my hours because I'm missing that 768 hours that I had there. This 372 hours is from my placement page. If you look on my placement page, that's where those hours will add up. Here's my unpaid hours. Here's my paid hours. That totals up all those hours. So if I go back to my additional requirements page and I plug back in that 768 hours, then we'll see it says met again. So that number up here, if your student is qualifying on hours, you have to have the hours plugged in here that they have in their entrepreneurship, but placement hours would just automatically go here in either unpaid or paid. So does anybody have any questions? Again, this is not a page you type in. This is a page that's your summary results. But the information, if it doesn't say met, then you have to go back in your application and look at some places where you might need to examine that a little bit further. Activities, this is where they list their activities, and I would put activity name, forestry CDE, and it was at the state level, and I am going to hit add. And if you wanted to list out the year like these previous ones have done, it's going to put it in 17 over here, but if you wanted to say it ahead of it like this so that it does look nice and uniform and organized, then you need to type in the word 2017 Forestry CDE and then click on State and click Add. And then if I want to get rid of this one because I don't like the fact that it doesn't have the year in front of it, I can simply click Delete and it will delete it. That's how your students enter their leadership activities within the state degree application. Skills and competencies. This is where students first thing they have to do is pick their pathway. And this is a very lengthy list, and there have been people that have been like, I can't find it as there's too many choices. It is very lengthy because it has all the pathways here, but it's asking your student to pick out the things that they have done in plant systems. Apply my knowledge of plant anatomy and functions of plant structures to activities associated with plant systems. That's what I picked, and then I give my details of what I've done in crop scouting. And that's where a student would type that information in. I'm going to get rid of some of my old stuff here. But they pick their pathway, then they write their description. Community service. Here are the community service pages. They have to have at least 25 hours and have to be at least 2 different activities. And you can see students can list a variety of things. I do want to make sure that we reiterate that community service is serving a greater community or the community as a whole, not just rake my neighbor's leaves. That's great, you raked your neighbor's leaves, but community service is serving the community. And so if there are questions about community service, your committee can ask those questions, you can ask those questions, but I can assure you that our committee reviews, the State Degree Review Committee does review the community service hours as well to make sure that they meet the requirements for community service. Because when we submit American degree applications, community service is one of those items that they do monitor pretty closely at the national level. And while we haven't had anybody rejected, we have had them contact us in July after they've reviewed them and ask us to have the student make some corrections or changes to community service. So we're sticklers on it with the state level so that if a student is going for their American, they're prepared for that. But this is similar to what we did with FFA activities. I'm going to say I work for the church, and I am cooking funeral meals. And for those of you who know me, I'm not the best cook, but I sure know how to help with funeral meals. And it was 3 hours. I hit add. It adds to it. It's added down here at the list. It adds 3 more hours, and now I'm up to 83 hours. And it says met. Then I have met my community service requirements. Then here is my checklist. And you can see that it's missing my FFA number, which is something that we talked about on the very beginning page of my cover. So I will, if it says missing, I'm going to click on it. It's going to take me to the cover, and it's going to show, oh, my member ID is not there. We don't have a member ID for the state, so that's always going to say missing for me. What's the other thing it says is not met? It says both paid and earnings are required for paid placement activities. What does that mean? It says, well, it says I was paid these hours, but I didn't put any earnings. So I need to edit this line, and for my earnings, I need to put however much I was paid for those hours. And now, let's see, now I say I was paid here. Oh, but I don't have any paid, so I need to put in some earnings there as well. And it looks like my earnings are there for the rest of mine. So let me go check my checklist. And now I'm okay there, but what did it do? It threw off my balance sheet because I have this money here, this $1,090 that I said I earned, but where is it at? So if you remember correctly, I'll go back to my basic setup page, and I will add that money into what I say is in my savings account. And if I go back to my checklist, oh, it's still saying I have an error because I can't do math. 520. All right. Almost 200. Okay. And now it says met. The other thing that maybe it's all in my savings, but maybe I spent some of it too. And so that's another thing that, you know, I'm just trying to show you quickly where this information comes from, but your student needs to check their books to see was it money that was spent or was it money that it is in the savings account or in their checking account that they have. So I go back to my checklist, and I had another item that was not met. So I'll click on the item, and it takes me to this page, and clearly I did not finish this. But if I wanted to very quickly finish this, I'm just picking random pathways, and I'm just going to type in some letters on each line. Now, I obviously would not encourage this, but I'm just showing you what happens when we finish it, what it does to the checklist. Now it says everything is met. But I will go back to this because this is not an accurate skills or competency, but I'll look at my checklist and it should say not met again, but it keeps saying met because I picked the pathway. Okay, so that's the checklist, and that's how you move through the state degree application. Here is what happens when I want to print the application. It's going to tell me you're missing something. You're not met. And what I'm not met on, if you remember correctly, is my chapter or my ID number, and I don't have an ID number. So I will click on this. It will generate a PDF. I will open the PDF. Because I'm not met, it says draft, draft, draft. But if it was met and I had a chapter number on there, it would no longer say draft. And this is my state degree application that I can now print off and have ready for my proficiency judge or for my state degree judging interview. And it prints every page just as you had typed it in. The checklist that you looked at there. And then this is last year's checklist. The board just approved last Friday on a new state degree checklist that I posted out on a listserv today. I have that state degree checklist pulled up for us to look at here very shortly, but AET will make the changes and they will have our new state degree checklist generated at the end of this document. So if you were to work on your state degree now and be all done, the checklist isn't accurate yet because we just got it board approved on this past Friday, and AET will get that uploaded soon. So to look at that checklist, this is what I sent, posted out on the listserv today. This is the checklist. If you want to print one of these checklists out and read it for yourself or read it as you're going through stuff with your students, these are items in kind of a combination of an old checklist from 2 years ago and last year's checklist on the state degree application. Hopefully it will help you find stuff if it's in the record book or if it's on the application, and then where at on the application, and then where at in the record books. Because as we know, many times in these interviews and when we're looking at these books and the application, we're looking at both AET or Easy Records and maybe sometimes a little bit of both. So this checklist will hopefully guide you through that process with your state degree. So again, the checklist at the end of the application is last year's. Once it was board approved, the new one will be added. The new one is what I posted on a listserv message today. This listserv message has FFA board updates, and it has the new state degree checklist right there. So you could click on it and get to it yourself. And that is the information about the state FFA degree. Are there any questions that I can answer for anyone in general at this time? I don't see any typed questions. I don't hear anybody taking themselves off of mute. I don't want to rush through this, but I want to make sure I answer all your questions. But if you don't have any questions, we can conclude the webinar. But again, happy to answer any questions that any of you may have. Check in the idea bubble. I don't see any questions there. If you want to, I'll give you a few minutes to take yourself off mute to ask any questions if you have any. But at this time, I want to thank you for being on the State Degree webinar. I hope the information was beneficial to you, helpful to you, and answers your questions. But again, at any time you have any state FFA degree or proficiency questions, don't hesitate to email me. I will be happy to get back to you and help you through that process. So at this time, I'm going to stop the recording of the webinar.